In 1876, a 19-year-old girl stood before a Wyoming rancher who believed she was 25. The lie that had bought her passage west now felt like a noose tightening around her neck. Every kind word he spoke, every patient gesture he offered, made the truth harder to carry. She had come west to escape poverty and ruin, but she was about to discover that deception has a price, and love demands something far more valuable than a perfect story. This is the story of Clara Whitmore, the girl who lied to survive, and the cowboy who taught her that honesty was the only foundation worth building on. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Clara's story travels. And if this tale moves you, hit that like button and stay until the end. You won't regret it. The stagecoach lurched over another rut in the Wyoming road, and Clara Whitmore's stomach lurched with it. She pressed her gloved hand against the worn leather seat, steadying herself, though no amount of physical balance could calm the riot of fear churning inside her chest. Through the dust-caked window, she caught glimpses of endless prairie, rolling hills of brown grass beneath a sky so vast it seemed to swallow everything beneath it. This was a land that promised freedom, opportunity, a fresh beginning. But Clara wasn't thinking about promises. She was thinking about lies. The letter was still folded in her reticule, creased from being read and reread 100 times during the long journey from Philadelphia. She could recite it from memory now, every carefully chosen word she'd written 3 months ago in response to an advertisement in the Rocky Mountain News. Respectable cattleman seeks mature, capable wife. Must be of good character, sound health, and prepared for the demands of frontier life. No frivolity. Respond with particulars to Nathan Cole, Clearwater Ranch, Wyoming Territory. Clara had responded with particulars, all right, particulars that were only half true. Her name was real, Clara Elizabeth Whitmore. Her orphan status was real. Her parents had died of typhoid when she was 16, leaving her with nothing but debts and a rented room in a Philadelphia boarding house that smelled of boiled cabbage and broken dreams. Her needlework skills were real, as was her ability to read and write, to manage a household budget, to work from dawn until dusk without complaint. But her age, that was a fiction. I am 25 years of age, she had written in her careful, slanted script. I have managed a household since my parents' passing and am accustomed to hard work and simple living. I seek not luxury, but honest partnership in the security of a respectable home. 25. A mature woman, someone who had lived enough to know her own mind, to handle the isolation and challenges of ranch life, to be a true partner to a man who was building something substantial in the wilderness, not a desperate 19-year-old girl who had lied because she knew the truth would never be enough. The stagecoach hit another bump, and the man across from her, a traveling salesman who'd been dozing for the past hour, jolted awake with a snort. He blinked at Clara, tipped his hat, then settled back into his corner. There were only 3 passengers on this final leg to Clearwater: the salesman, Clara, and an older woman named Mrs. Henderson who was traveling to visit her married daughter. Mrs. Henderson had tried to make conversation earlier, asking Clara about her plans, her intended, whether she was nervous. Every bride has nerves, Mrs. Henderson had said with a knowing smile, but a good man makes all the difference. What's your gentleman's name? Nathan Cole, Clara had answered, her voice steadier than she felt. He owns a cattle ranch near Clearwater. Cole? Mrs. Henderson's eyes had widened with recognition. Oh, you've done well for yourself, dear. The Coles are one of the founding families out here. Respectable people. Nathan's father built that ranch from nothing, and Nathan's made it even more prosperous since taking over. You'll want for nothing as Mrs. Cole. Except honesty, Clara had thought. Except truth. She'd smiled and thanked Mrs. Henderson, then turned her face to the window, discouraging further conversation. The last thing she needed was more praise for Nathan Cole's character, more reminders of the upstanding man she was about to deceive. The stagecoach began to slow. Through the window, Clara saw the first buildings of Clearwater emerging from the prairie like promises carved in wood and stone. It wasn't much of a town, a wide main street lined with false front buildings, a church with a white steeple, a general store, a bank, a hotel, a livery stable. Everything was dusty, sun-bleached, raw with newness. This was a place still becoming itself, still deciding what it would be. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Clear water, the driver called from above. 20-minute stop, Clearwater, Wyoming territory. The stagecoach rolled to a halt in front of the hotel, and a small crowd had gathered, the kind of crowd that assembled whenever the weekly stage arrived, bringing news and goods and occasionally new people to a town hungry for both. Clara saw weathered men in work clothes, women in practical dresses and sunbonnets, a few children darting between the adults. And there, standing slightly apart from the others, was a man who could only be Nathan Cole. Clara knew him immediately, though she'd never seen a photograph. He stood well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and lean in the way of men who worked with their bodies every day. He wore dark trousers, a plain shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, a leather vest, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. His hands hung relaxed at his sides, but there was an alertness to his posture, a quiet attention that suggested he missed very little. He was watching the stagecoach door, waiting for her. The driver climbed down and opened the door. The salesman exited first, then turned to offer his hand to Mrs. Henderson. Clara remained frozen in her seat, her breath coming in short, shallow pulls. "Miss?" The driver peered into the coach. "You getting out, or you planning to ride this thing all the way back to Cheyenne?" Clara forced herself to move. She gathered her reticule and small travel bag, accepted the driver's hand, and stepped down into the Wyoming sunlight. It was brighter here than in Philadelphia, sharper, the air so clean it almost hurt to breathe. The crowd's conversation dimmed slightly as people noticed her, the mail-order bride, the stranger, the woman who'd come to marry Nathan Cole. And Nathan was walking toward her. Clara's first coherent thought was that he looked older than 32. Not old exactly, but weathered. There were lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, a hardness to his jaw that spoke of decisions made and consequences accepted. His eyes were a startling blue-gray, the color of storm clouds, and they studied Clara with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she didn't. She lifted her chin and met his gaze, channeling every ounce of the mature, capable woman she'd claimed to be. Nathan stopped 3 feet away and removed his hat. His hair was dark brown, slightly too long, with a wave that suggested it would curl if he let it grow. "Miss Whitmore?" His voice was deep, quiet, with a slight western drawl that softened the consonants. "Mr. Cole." Clara's voice came out steadier than she'd expected. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." For a long moment, Nathan simply looked at her. Clara resisted the urge to fidget under his examination, to smooth her travel-worn dress or adjust her bonnet. She was keenly aware of how she must appear, dusty, rumpled, younger than the photograph she'd sent, which had been carefully posed to add maturity to her features. Then Nathan's expression shifted into something that might have been approval. "Welcome to Clearwater, Miss Whitmore. I hope the journey wasn't too difficult." "Long," Claire admitted, "but not unpleasant." "Your trunks?" "Just the one. The driver's getting it down now." Nathan nodded and moved to retrieve her trunk, a battered leather case that contained everything she owned. He lifted it as though it weighed nothing, then turned back to her. "My wagon's just there. I thought we'd get you settled at the ranch, let you rest from the journey. There's no rush for anything else." Clara understood what he meant. No rush for the wedding, no pressure to make immediate decisions. He was giving her time, space, the opportunity to change her mind if she chose. It was the kindness in the gesture that made her throat tighten with guilt. "Thank you," she managed. "That's very considerate." As Nathan led her toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 bay horses, Clara was aware of the watching eyes, the whispered conversations. In a town this small, Nathan Cole's mail-order bride would be the subject of speculation for weeks. She could already imagine the questions. Was she pretty? Did she look capable? Would the marriage take? Would she last? Nathan helped her onto the wagon seat with surprising gentleness for such a large man, then climbed up beside her. He released the brake and gave a soft click of his tongue, and the horses started forward at an easy walk. As they left Clearwater behind, the noise and bustle faded into the vast prairie silence. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Clara kept her hands folded in her lap, her eyes on the horizon where the land met the sky in an endless seam. She'd never seen so much space in her life. In Philadelphia, her world had been narrow streets and crowded buildings, the sky reduced to a strip of gray between roof lines. Here, the sky was everything, so big it made her feel both impossibly small and strangely free. It's different from what you're used to, Nathan said finally. It wasn't a question. Very different, Clara agreed, but not unwelcome. He glanced at her, and she saw the corner of his mouth lift in what might have been a smile. Takes some getting used to. The quiet, especially. People come out here thinking they want peace, then discover that much silence can be loud in its own way. I'm not afraid of quiet. Didn't think you would be. Your letters suggested you had sense. He paused. That's one reason I wrote back. Clara's heart sank. Her letters. She'd been so careful in crafting them, presenting herself as mature and practical in everything Nathan had asked for. Every word had been true except the one number that mattered most. What were the other reasons? She asked, partly to change the subject, partly because she genuinely wanted to know. Nathan considered this as the wagon rolled along the rutted road. You didn't romanticize what you'd be coming to. Some of the letters I received, they were full of notions about adventures and cowboys and wild frontier living, like it was all some grand story. He shook his head. This life isn't a story, it's work. Hard work most days. Isolation. You'll go weeks sometimes without seeing anyone beyond ranch hands and the occasional neighbor. Winters are brutal. Summer brings drought or storms or both. The cattle market can turn on you in a heartbeat. There's nothing grand about it. Then why do it? Clara asked. For the first time, Nathan's expression opened into something approaching warmth. Because it's mine. Every acre, every head of cattle, every fence post, I built it or I'm building it. When my father died, he left me a foundation. I've been building on it ever since, and when I'm gone, I'll leave something even stronger for whoever comes after. He met her eyes. That's what I'm looking for, Miss Whitmore. A partner who understands we're building something that outlasts us both. The weight of his words settled over Clara like a mantle. He wasn't looking for romance or companionship or even affection, really. He was looking for someone who shared his vision of legacy, of building something permanent in an impermanent world. And he thought he'd found that in her letters. I understand, Clara said quietly. Do you? Nathan's gaze was searching, but not unkind. Because if you're having second thoughts, better to say so now. I won't hold you to anything. If you want to stay in town, take the next stage back east, I'll pay your passage. No shame in it. Clara's pride stiffened her spine. I'm not having second thoughts, Mr. Cole. I came here to marry you, and that's still my intention. Unless you send me away when you learn the truth, she thought. Nathan nodded slowly. All right then. We'll take it slow, let you get your bearings. There's no rush. He said that again, no rush. And Clara realized it was his way of offering security. He was giving her control, power, the ability to set the pace. It was decent of him, honorable. It made the lie so much worse. They rode in companionable silence for another 20 minutes. The land began to shift, becoming slightly more rolling, with clusters of cottonwood trees marking the path of a creek. Then Clara saw it, Clearwater Ranch. The main house was larger than she'd expected. A two-story structure of solid timber with a wide front porch and real glass windows. Not fancy, but substantial, built to last. Around it she saw a barn, several outbuildings, corrals holding horses and cattle, and a bunkhouse where smoke curled from a chimney. Men moved about their work, pausing to glance at the approaching wagon before returning to their tasks. Home, Nathan said simply. As they drew closer, Clara noticed details. Curtains in the windows, a vegetable garden to one side of the house, flower boxes beneath the porch railings with the dried stalks of last season's blooms. Someone had cared about this place, had tried to make it more than just a shelter. Your mother? Clara asked, gesturing toward the flower boxes. Nathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. My mother died when I was 12. Those were her boxes. My father couldn't bring himself to take them down, so I haven't either. He pulled the wagon to a stop near the porch. Maybe you'll want to plant something in them come spring. It was an invitation, Clara realized, a tentative offer of belonging. Before she could respond, the front door opened and a woman emerged onto the porch. She was in her mid-50s, gray-haired and sturdy, with flour dusting her apron and kindness etched into the lines of her face. That'll be Mrs. Henley, Nathan said, climbing down from the wagon. She's been keeping house since my father passed. Good woman. You'll like her. He came around to help Clara down, and she was struck again by the gentleness in his large, work-hardened hands. Mrs. Henley bustled forward with a smile. "You must be Miss Whitmore. Welcome, dear, welcome. You must be exhausted from that dreadful journey. Come inside. I've got tea brewing and fresh bread. Mr. Cole, bring her trunk up to the blue bedroom, if you would." Clara found herself swept into the house on a tide of Mrs. Henley's cheerful hospitality. The interior was as solid as the exterior. Clean wooden floors, simple furniture built for use rather than show, a stone fireplace that dominated one wall of the main room. Everything spoke of masculine practicality, but there were touches here and there that suggested someone had once tried to soften the edges. A quilt draped over the back of a chair, a vase on the mantel, a shelf of books. Mrs. Henley led Clara to a comfortable parlor and pressed a cup of tea into her hands. "Now, you just rest yourself. I'm sure Mr. Cole told you there's no rush for anything. We'll get you settled, let you catch your breath, and then we'll see about the rest." "Thank you," Clara said. "You're very kind." "Nonsense. It's about time this house had a proper mistress again." Mrs. Henley lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Mr. Cole's a good man, but he's been alone too long. A man needs a wife, needs partnership. You'll be good for him, I can tell." The guilt was a physical ache in Clara's chest. Over the next several days, Clara settled into a routine that felt both strange and oddly natural. Nathan gave her space, as promised. He took his meals with her and Mrs. Henley, conversed politely about the ranch and the weather and safe, impersonal topics, but he didn't press for intimacy or even extended time alone. He treated her with the kind of careful respect one might show a business associate, which Clara supposed was exactly what she was, a prospective business partner in the enterprise of building a legacy. But as the days passed, Clara began to see beyond Nathan's reserved exterior. She saw how he spoke to his ranch hands, firmly but fairly, never asking them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. She saw how he checked on an injured horse 3 times a day, how he noticed when the cook was running low on supplies and made arrangements without being asked, how he studied the sky each evening as though reading a book only he could decipher. She saw a man who carried responsibility like other men carried pocket watches, constantly aware of its weight, checking it, tending to it, never setting it down. And she saw how the community respected him. When they drove into town for supplies, people greeted Nathan with genuine warmth. The banker consulted him about lending practices. The sheriff asked his opinion on a property dispute. The minister invited them both to Sunday dinner. Nathan Cole was exactly what Mrs. Henderson had said, a founding family, a pillar of the community, a man of unquestioned integrity, which made Clara's deception feel like a betrayal not just of Nathan, but of everyone who trusted his judgment. She tried to prove herself worthy despite the lie. She learned the routines of the ranch, helped Mrs. Henley with cooking and preserving, mended clothes, organized the chaotic account books that Nathan had been neglecting. She was good at these things, capable and efficient, and she could see Nathan's approval growing with each passing day. But she could also see his trust growing, and that was worse. One evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Nathan invited Clara to walk with him after supper. They strolled toward the creek that bordered the property, the autumn air crisp and clean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed impossible, too vivid to be real. "You've settled in well," Nathan observed. "Better than I expected, honestly." "Did you think I'd run screaming back to Philadelphia?" Clara asked lightly. "Some do. Not literally, but this life isn't what most people imagine. The reality of it can be jarring." He picked up a smooth stone and sent it skipping across the creek. "You're tougher than you look." Clara watched the ripples spread across the water. "Circumstances make us tough, whether we want to be or not. Your letters mentioned your parents passing. That must have been difficult." "It was." Clara chose her words carefully, staying close to the truth where she could. "They died within days of each other. Typhoid. I was 16. After that, I had to manage alone, pay their debts, keep the room, find work. There wasn't anyone to take care of me, so I learned to take care of myself." Nathan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. 16 is young to face that alone. Too young, Clara thought, which was why she'd lied about being 25, because she'd known that 19 would sound just as helpless as 16 had been. "We do what we must," she said instead. "Yes." Nathan turned to face her, his expression serious in the fading light. "Miss Whitmore, Clara, I want to be clear about something. I know these past weeks have been a kind of trial period for both of us, but I'm satisfied with what I've seen. You're everything your letters suggested: capable, hardworking, sensible. If you're still willing, I'd like to set a date for the wedding, perhaps 3 weeks from now. That would give you time to prepare, and Mrs. Henley can help with whatever you need." Clara's heart stopped, then started again too fast. This was it. The moment when the lie became permanent or the truth destroyed everything. 3 weeks, she repeated, "unless you need more time." She should tell him now, right now, in this moment of honesty and fading daylight. She should confess the one lie that stood between them and let him decide whether it mattered. But looking at Nathan's face, earnest and open in a way she'd never seen it, Clara couldn't find the words, because she knew what he would see when she told him. Not a capable woman who'd survived on her own, not a hard-working partner who'd proven herself. He would see a 19-year-old girl who'd lied to trap a respectable man into marriage. 3 weeks is fine, Clara heard herself say. Perfect. Nathan's rare smile appeared, transforming his weathered face into something almost handsome. Good, that's good. I'll speak to the minister tomorrow, start making arrangements. As they walked back to the house, Nathan talked about the wedding plans. Simple, he thought, just family and close neighbors, nothing elaborate. And Clara made appropriate responses while her mind screamed at her cowardice. She'd had her chance and squandered it. Now she had 3 weeks to find the courage she couldn't summon tonight. 3 weeks until she became Mrs. Nathan Cole under false pretenses. 3 weeks until the lie became a marriage. But the days had a way of slipping past like water through cupped hands. Clara threw herself into preparations, letting Mrs. Henley's cheerful planning distract her from the growing weight of guilt. There were decisions to make about the ceremony, the meal afterward, what she would wear. Mrs. Henley enlisted the help of neighboring women, and Clara found herself welcomed into a community of ranchers' wives who'd all come west seeking something: opportunity, adventure, escape, love. "You're lucky," one of them told Clara over tea. "Nathan Cole is the best kind of man, honest as the day is long. You won't have to wonder where you stand with him." Clara smiled and agreed, all while thinking, but he doesn't know where he stands with me. She tried several times to tell him. She planned conversations, rehearsed confessions, steeled herself for honesty. But each time Nathan showed her kindness, asking her opinion on ranch business, sharing stories about his father, expressing quiet contentment with their arrangement, she faltered. He was building trust between them, brick by careful brick, and Clara couldn't bring herself to demolish it. Not yet. Maybe after the wedding, she told herself. Maybe once they were truly married, once she'd proven herself as his wife, the age wouldn't matter anymore. Maybe love, if it came, would make the lie forgivable. It was a coward's reasoning, and Clara knew it. 2 days before the wedding, Nathan surprised her with a gift. He presented it awkwardly, clearly unused to such gestures, his hands rough and uncertain as he handed her a small wooden box. "This was my mother's," he said. "I thought, if you wanted, you could wear it at the wedding." Inside the box was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant, a wildflower carved in miniature detail. It was beautiful, simple, clearly treasured. "Nathan, I couldn't—" "She would have wanted you to have it." He met Clara's eyes. She believed in family, in passing things down. This is part of that. Clara's hands trembled as she lifted the necklace from its box. The silver was cool against her fingers, the weight of it both literal and symbolic. This wasn't just jewelry. This was trust, legacy. Nathan offering her a place in his family's story, and she was going to accept it while lying about who she was. "Thank you," Clara whispered, because what else could she say? "I'll treasure it." Nathan's expression softened with relief and something that might have been affection. "Good. That's good." That night, alone in the blue bedroom that would soon become hers permanently, Clara held the necklace and let herself cry for the first time since leaving Philadelphia. She cried for the girl she'd been at 16, orphaned and desperate. She cried for the lie she'd told to survive. She cried for Nathan's trust in Mrs. Henley's kindness and the community that had welcomed her without question. And she cried because she knew, deep in her bones, that she couldn't marry Nathan Cole without telling him the truth. The lie had bought her a future, but it wasn't a future she could live with. Tomorrow, she would confess everything. Tomorrow, she would give Nathan the honesty he deserved and accept whatever came after. If he sent her away, so be it. At least she would leave with her integrity intact. At least she would know she'd tried to do the right thing, even if it came too late. Clara fell asleep with the necklace still clutched in her hand, Nathan's mother's legacy pressed against her heart like both a promise and an accusation. In 2 days, she was supposed to become Mrs. Nathan Cole. But first, she had to find the courage to tell him who Clara Whitmore really was. The morning sun came too quickly, spilling golden light across Clara's bedroom floor like an accusation. She woke with the necklace still tangled in her fingers, the delicate silver chain leaving faint impressions on her palm. For a moment, in that soft space between sleep and waking, she forgot about the confession she'd promised herself. Then reality crashed back, heavy as stone. Today. She would tell him today. Clara dressed with trembling hands, choosing a simple blue cotton dress that Mrs. Henley had helped her alter to fit properly. She pinned her dark hair into a neat bun, studying her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. 19 years looked back at her, too young, too scared, too aware of what she was about to lose. She touched the necklace where it lay on her dresser, then left it there. She hadn't earned the right to wear it yet. Downstairs, Mrs. Henley was already bustling about the kitchen, the smell of coffee and frying bacon filling the air. The older woman looked up with a bright smile when Clara appeared. "There you are, dear. I was just about to call you. Mr. Cole's already eaten. He's out checking the north fence line, but I kept yours warm. You need to eat properly, especially with all the excitement these next few days." Clara's stomach churned at the thought of food, but she sat obediently at the kitchen table and accepted the plate Mrs. Henley set before her. The bacon was perfectly crisp, the eggs done just the way Clara had mentioned she liked them weeks ago. Even in small things, the people in this house paid attention, cared about details. It made everything worse. "Mrs. Henley," Clara began, then hesitated. "When Mr. Cole returns, I need to speak with him, privately. It's important." The housekeeper's expression shifted to concern. "Is everything all right, dear? You're not having second thoughts, are you? Because it's perfectly natural to feel nervous before a wedding. Why, when I married my Henry, I nearly fainted at the altar. But it was just nerves, nothing more." "It's not nerves," Clara said carefully. "I just need to discuss something with him. Something I should have mentioned before now." Mrs. Henley studied her for a long moment, and Clara saw the worry deepen in her eyes. But the older woman simply nodded. "I'll let him know when he comes in. He usually returns around mid-morning for coffee." The hours until then stretched like years. Clara tried to occupy herself with mending, with organizing the linen closet, with anything that might quiet the panic rising in her chest. But her hands shook too badly for fine needlework, and her mind couldn't focus on household tasks. She kept rehearsing what she would say, how she would explain. "Mr. Cole, Nathan, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have been honest about from the beginning. I lied in my letters. I'm not 25. I'm 19. I was desperate and afraid, and I thought the lie was the only way you'd consider me. But I can't marry you without telling you the truth." Each version sounded worse than the last. At 10:30, Clara heard the sound of boots on the porch. Her heart lurched. Through the window, she saw Nathan walking toward the house, his hat in his hand, his shirt dusty from work. He paused to speak with one of the ranch hands, his expression serious but not unkind. Even from a distance, Clara could see the competence in every movement, the quiet authority that made men respect him. A man who valued honesty above all else, a man she'd been deceiving for weeks. Mrs. Henley appeared in the doorway of the parlor where Clara had been pretending to read. "Mr. Cole's just come in. He's washing up, but I told him you needed a word. He'll meet you in his study when he's ready." "Thank you," Clara managed. The study was Nathan's private domain. A small room off the main hall lined with ledgers and ranch records. A large desk cluttered with papers and maps. A window that looked out over the corrals. Clara had been inside only once before, when Nathan had asked her opinion on a bookkeeping discrepancy. She'd felt like an intruder then, too aware that she was entering a space that reflected Nathan's true self. She felt even more like an intruder now. Clara stood by the window, watching the horses in the corral, until she heard Nathan's footsteps in the hall. She turned as he entered, trying to read his expression. He looked curious but not concerned, his weather-beaten face open and attentive. "Mrs. Henley said you needed to speak with me." He gestured to the chair in front of his desk. "Please sit." "I'd rather stand if that's all right." Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Of course. What's on your mind?" This was it. The moment Clara had been dreading and promising herself for days. She took a breath, searching for the words she'd rehearsed, but they scattered like leaves in wind. What came out instead was simpler, raw. "I haven't been completely honest with you." The change in Nathan's expression was subtle but unmistakable. A slight tightening around his eyes, a straightening of his shoulders. "I see. About what?" "About—" Clara's voice caught. She forced herself to continue. "About my age." Nathan waited, perfectly still. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking of the clock on his desk and the distant sound of someone hammering in one of the outbuildings. "I'm not 25, Clara said finally. "I'm 19. I lied in my letters because I was afraid you wouldn't consider someone so young. I was desperate to leave Philadelphia, desperate for security and a future, and I thought the lie was justified. But it wasn't, it isn't, and I can't marry you without you knowing the truth." She'd expected anger, accusations, immediate dismissal. What she didn't expect was the way Nathan simply absorbed the information, his expression shifting through surprise, understanding, and something she couldn't quite name. 19, he repeated softly. "Yes. And you've been carrying this since you arrived." It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. "Yes." Nathan moved to the window, standing beside her but not touching, his gaze fixed on something distant. Clara could see his jaw working, the muscle there tightening and releasing as he processed what she'd told him. The silence was agonizing. "Why tell me now?" he asked finally. "You could have kept quiet. I never would have known." The question surprised her. Claire had expected him to ask why she'd lied, not why she'd confessed. "Because it wasn't right. Because you've been nothing but kind and decent, and you deserve honesty. Because I couldn't—" Her voice cracked. "I couldn't stand in front of the minister and make vows while hiding something so fundamental." Nathan turned to look at her then, and Clara saw confusion in his eyes rather than anger. "You're 19, he said again, as if testing the reality of it. "You managed alone for 3 years after your parents died, 16 to 19. "Yes?" "You worked, paid debts, kept yourself fed and housed." "I did what I had to do." "Most 19-year-olds couldn't have done what you did. Hell, most 25-year-olds couldn't have." Nathan shook his head slowly. "You came all the way out here alone, adapted to a life completely foreign to everything you knew, proved yourself capable in every way that matters. That takes courage. That takes strength." Clara blinked, uncertain whether she was hearing correctly. "I lied to you." "Yes, you did." Nathan's voice was quiet but firm. "And that troubles me. Not the age itself. You're right that I might not have considered someone 19 in my initial responses. But that's my own prejudice, not a reflection of your actual capability. What troubles me is the deception, the weeks of letting me believe something that wasn't true." There it was, the condemnation Clara had been expecting. She braced herself for what would come next. The anger, the dismissal, the order to pack her things and return to Philadelphia. Instead, Nathan asked, "Why were you so desperate to leave? Your letters mention debts, but there's more to it than that, isn't there?" The question caught Clara off guard. She'd prepared herself for accusation, not inquiry. After my parents died, I had to leave our apartment. The only place I could afford was a boarding house in a rough part of the city. The owner was persistent, insistent that I could work off my rent in other ways if money was tight. Nathan's expression darkened. "He touched you?" "He tried. I managed to keep him at bay, but it was only a matter of time. The debts were mounting, my needlework wasn't bringing in enough, and I could feel the walls closing in. When I saw your advertisement, it felt like the only way out, a respectable escape. So you lied to take it? Yes. Clara lifted her chin, refusing to make excuses. I was desperate, but that doesn't justify the deception. I knew it was wrong even as I wrote those letters. I convinced myself it didn't matter, that I could be the woman you needed regardless of my actual age. Nathan was quiet for a long time. He moved back to his desk, picked up a piece of paper, set it down again. Clara watched the war play out across his face, disappointment wrestling with understanding, principle battling pragmatism. You could have told me when you arrived, he said finally. That first day, when I gave you the chance to turn back. I know. I should have. But I was afraid you'd send me away, and I had nowhere to go. By the time I realized I couldn't live with the lie, weeks had passed and the wedding was approaching, and Claire's composure finally cracked. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You trusted me, and I betrayed that trust, and I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know before we stood before the minister. You deserve that much at least. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over, hot and ashamed. Clara turned away, not wanting Nathan to see her cry, but he was there suddenly, pressing a clean handkerchief into her hand. Don't, he said gruffly. Don't cry. I can't think when someone's crying. Clara almost laughed at the uncomfortable honesty in his voice. She wiped her eyes, struggling to compose herself. I'm sorry. I don't mean to manipulate. I know you don't. That's not who you are. Nathan stepped back, giving her space. Clara, look at me. She did, reluctantly, expecting to see disgust or pity. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like respect. You could have kept the lie going, Nathan said. You had me convinced. Mrs. Henley, the neighbors, everyone. You'd proven yourself capable, and the wedding was 2 days away. You could have married me, and I never would have known the truth. But you didn't. You confessed, knowing it might cost you everything. That takes more courage than the lie took cowardice. Clara stared at him. You're not sending me away? I didn't say that. Nathan's expression was serious. The lie troubles me deeply, Clara. Trust is the foundation of any partnership, especially out here where you have to depend on each other for survival. If I can't trust your word, how can I trust you with my home, my business, my future? The words hit like physical blows. Clara nodded, accepting the judgment. I understand. I'll pack my things. If you could arrange passage back to... I'm not finished. Nathan held up a hand. The lie troubles me. But I also understand why you told it. Desperate people make desperate choices. You were 16 when your world fell apart. 19 when you had to choose between a dangerous situation and a dishonest escape. I'm not excusing the lie, but I'm also not blind to the circumstances that created it. He moved to the window again, his back to Clara, his shoulders tense. My father used to say that character isn't revealed in easy choices. Anyone can be honest when honesty costs nothing. True character shows in the hard moments, when doing the right thing means losing something valuable. Clara waited, hardly daring to breathe. You just did the right thing, Nathan continued, knowing it would likely cost you the security you came here seeking. That tells me something about who you really are. Not the age you claimed, not the desperate girl who lied to survive, but the woman who found the courage to confess when she didn't have to. He turned to face her. So here's what I'm proposing. We postpone the wedding. Clara's heart sank. Postponement was just a kinder word for cancellation. Not permanently, Nathan added quickly, but I need time to decide if I can move past this. And you need time to decide if you can be honest with me going forward. Complete honesty, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable. How long? Clara asked quietly. A month. Maybe 2. You'll stay here as a guest. Mrs. Henley will chaperone everything proper. You'll have time to experience what life here really means, and I'll have time to see if the trust can be rebuilt. If, at the end of that time, we both feel the marriage is still right, we'll proceed. If not, I'll pay your passage wherever you want to go, with enough money to get established. No strings, no obligations. It was more than Clara deserved, far more than she'd expected. Why? She asked. Why give me another chance? Nathan smiled faintly. Because everyone deserves a second chance. And because despite the lie, you've shown me exactly the kind of partner I was looking for. Capable, hardworking, willing to do what's necessary. I'd be a fool to throw that away over a number. But the trust will take time to rebuild. I won't pretend otherwise. But I think it's possible, if you're willing to do the work. Clara felt something unfurl in her chest. Not quite hope, but something close. Relief, maybe, mixed with gratitude and determination. I am willing, to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. Then we'll start fresh. No more lies, no more hiding. You have questions, you ask them. I have concerns, I voice them. We build this partnership on honesty, or we don't build it at all. Agreed. Clara extended her hand formally. Thank you, Nathan, for giving me this chance. He took her hand, his grip firm and warm. Don't thank me yet. Rebuilding trust is harder than building it the first place. We've got a long road ahead. But as Clara left the study, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. The lie was out. Nathan knew the truth, and he hadn't sent her away. They had a chance, a real chance, to build something honest between them, if only she could prove herself worthy of it. The next days unfolded with a strange new awkwardness. Nathan informed Mrs. Henley and the ranch hands that the wedding was postponed for personal reasons, and if anyone speculated about why, they kept it to themselves. The neighbors who'd been invited to the ceremony were politely notified, and if there was gossip in town, it didn't reach Clara's ears. Mrs. Henley took the news with surprising equanimity. Sometimes these things need more time, she said to Clara over tea. Better to be certain than to rush into something you'll regret. If she suspected the real reason for the postponement, she didn't say. Clara threw herself into ranch life with renewed determination. She woke before dawn to help Mrs. Henley with breakfast for the hands, learned to churn butter and render lard, mastered the temperamental wood stove that smoked unless the flue was adjusted just so. She organized Nathan's chaotic account books, creating a system that allowed him to track expenses and income at a glance. She mended everything that needed mending, from work shirts to leather tack, and slowly, carefully, she began to learn about the man she'd agreed to marry. Nathan was not effusive. He didn't share his thoughts freely or talk about his feelings. But Clara discovered that he revealed himself in other ways, in the patient way he worked with a skittish horse, in his insistence on fair wages for the hands, in the small kindnesses he showed without expecting acknowledgement. One afternoon, Clara was hanging laundry when she heard raised voices from the barn. She recognized Nathan's deep rumble and a younger voice she didn't know. Curious, she moved closer. I don't care what excuse you've got, the younger man was saying angrily. You can't just fire me because I'm not firing you because of anything except your own choices, Tom. Nathan's voice was calm but unyielding. I told you 3 times. No drinking during work hours. You showed up drunk this morning. That's not acceptable. It was 1 time. It was 3 times. The first 2 I gave you warnings. This is the consequence. Clara heard the sound of something being thrown, a tool maybe, and the younger man's bitter curse. You're a self-righteous son of a... That's enough. Nathan's voice dropped dangerously low. You can be angry, but you'll be respectful. I'm giving you 2 weeks' pay and a letter of reference that says you're a capable hand when you're sober. What you do with that is up to you. But you're done here. There was silence, then the sound of footsteps. A young man emerged from the barn, red-faced and furious. He saw Clara and his expression twisted into something ugly. This your fault? He spat. The great Nathan Cole getting rid of anyone who might make his precious bride uncomfortable? Before Clara could respond, Nathan appeared in the barn doorway. Tom, leave, now. The young man looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Nathan's stance made him think better of it. He stalked off toward the bunkhouse, cursing under his breath. Nathan watched him go, then noticed Clara. You heard that. Some of it, Clara admitted. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. He's a good worker when he's sober, but I can't have someone unreliable on a working ranch. One drunk mistake around cattle or horses could get someone killed. Nathan sighed. His father worked for my father. I hate disappointing the family. You gave him chances, Clara pointed out. More than he deserved, sounds like. 3 chances. My father always said 3 strikes is fair. One might be a mistake, two is a pattern, three is a choice. Nathan looked at Clara thoughtfully. Lying isn't the same as drinking, Clara. And you came clean on your own. Tom never did. That's the difference. Clara understood what he was really saying. He was still measuring whether she deserved the chance he'd given her. Whether trust could be rebuilt or whether the foundation was too damaged. She would have to prove it through actions, not words. That evening, after supper, Nathan invited Clara to walk with him again. It had become something of a routine, a quiet time to talk without Mrs. Henley's well-meaning presence or the demands of ranch work. They headed toward the creek as twilight painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. "I've been thinking," Nathan began, "about what you said, about the boarding house owner." Clara stiffened. She hadn't wanted to share that detail, but honesty meant not hiding the uncomfortable truths. "Did he ever succeed?" Nathan asked bluntly. "In his advances?" "No, I was careful, kept my door locked, avoided being alone with him. But it was exhausting, constantly being on guard in the one place that should have been safe." Nathan's jaw tightened. No one should have to live like that. "Many do. I wasn't special. You survived it. That makes you special enough." He picked up a stone and sent it skipping across the creek. "When I wrote that advertisement, I thought I wanted someone mature, settled. But maybe what I really wanted was someone who understood that life is hard, and you do what you must to survive it. Someone with grit." "Is that what you think I have? Grit?" "I think you have more of it than most people twice your age." Nathan glanced at her. "The work you've been doing these past days, the account books, the organizing, the way you've helped Mrs. Henley, you're good at this. Better than I expected." "I told you I was capable." "You did. And that at least was true." He smiled faintly. "See? We're building trust, one verified truth at a time." Clara laughed despite herself. "At this rate, it'll take years." "We've got time." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. The creek burbled over smooth stones, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. The sound should have been eerie, but somehow it wasn't. It was just part of the landscape, part of the vast, wild beauty of this place Clara was trying to make home. "Can I ask you something?" Clara ventured. "Always. That's the agreement." "Why did you want to marry at all? You have the ranch running well, Mrs. Henley keeping house, capable hands. You don't seem like someone who needs companionship for companionship's sake." Nathan considered this. "Legacy," he said finally. "My father built this ranch from nothing. I've expanded it, made it more profitable, built something sustainable. But when I'm gone, what happens to it? It gets sold off, broken up, turned into something other than what we built? That bothers me. I want children, someone to pass this to, someone to continue what we started. For that, I need a wife, a partner." "Not love?" Clara asked quietly. "Love is—" Nathan struggled for words. "Love is fine if it comes, but I've seen too many marriages built on romance fall apart when reality sets in. Out here, you need something stronger than feelings. You need partnership, mutual respect, shared purpose." "That sounds lonely." "Does it?" Nathan looked genuinely curious. "My parents had exactly that kind of marriage. They respected each other, worked together, built this ranch together. I never saw them fight or heard them say romantic things, but I saw my father hold my mother's hand every night at dinner. I saw him plant those flower boxes because she mentioned once that she missed her garden back east. I saw him broken when she died, like half of himself had been torn away. If that's not love, I don't know what is." Clara thought about her own parents, their laughter, their frequent quarrels, the way they danced in the kitchen when they thought Clara was asleep. They'd been romantic and passionate and utterly devoted to each other, and they'd died within days, leaving Clara alone because they'd built no foundation beyond their love for each other. Maybe Nathan's way was wiser. "I think I understand," she said. "Good, because that's what I'm offering you, Clara. Not romance or grand gestures, but partnership, respect, a shared purpose in building something that outlasts us both. If you want more than that, you should say so now." Clara thought about what she'd wanted when she'd answered his advertisement: security, safety, a future that wasn't balanced on the edge of disaster. She'd found all that here, and something more. A man who valued honesty and hard work, who made decisions based on principle rather than impulse, who was building something permanent in an impermanent world. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it was more than enough. "I want what you're offering," Clara said. "Partnership, respect, shared purpose. The rest, if it comes, it comes. If not, I think we'll still have built something worthwhile." Nathan nodded, satisfied. "Then we're agreed. We'll take the next few weeks to continue building trust. We'll work together, talk honestly, see if this can work. And when we're both certain, we'll set a new wedding date. And if we're not certain, then we'll part as friends, and you'll have gained some time to figure out what you really want from life." He held out his hand. "Fair?" Clara took it. Fair. But as they walked back to the ranch house, Clara felt the weight of Nathan's mother's necklace in her mind, still sitting on her dresser, still unworn, still a symbol of trust she hadn't yet earned. She'd been given a second chance, and she wouldn't waste it. She would prove to Nathan that she was worth the risk he was taking, not because she was 25 or 19, but because of who she was beneath the numbers, a woman who'd survived, who'd learned, who'd found the courage to confess when staying silent would have been easier. A woman who understood that trust, once broken, had to be rebuilt stone by careful stone. And Clara was willing to do the work, however long it took. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that felt almost normal. Clara rose before dawn, worked alongside Mrs. Henley until her hands were raw and her back ached, spent evenings reviewing ranch accounts or mending in the parlor while Nathan read livestock reports. They talked over meals, walked by the creek when weather allowed, existed in a careful dance of proximity and propriety that was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding what Clara's lie had damaged. Trust, she was learning, grew like the prairie grass, slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day you looked around and realized the bare ground had transformed into something living. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Nathan asked Clara to accompany him into town for supplies. It was the first time they'd appeared in public together since the postponed wedding, and Clara felt the weight of curious eyes as Nathan helped her onto the wagon seat. Mrs. Henderson, who'd traveled west with Clara on the stagecoach, waved from across the street with an expression that clearly demanded gossip later. "They're all wondering," Clara said quietly as Nathan guided the horses onto the main road. "Let them wonder. It's nobody's business but ours." Still, the postponed wedding, me staying at the ranch, there will be talk. Nathan shrugged. "There's always talk. People speculated when I placed the advertisement, speculated when you arrived, speculated when we postponed. They'll speculate when we eventually marry, too. Can't live your life worrying about what the town thinks." Clara envied his indifference. In Philadelphia, reputation had been everything, the difference between respectable work and the kind of proposition her landlord had made. But Nathan moved through the world with the confidence of a man who'd built his standing on actions rather than appearances. The trip to town was pleasant enough. Nathan introduced Clara to the mercantile owner, a rotund man named Mr. Patterson, who treated her with friendly courtesy while his eyes gleamed with barely suppressed curiosity. They purchased flour and sugar, coffee and nails, bolts of fabric that Mrs. Henley had requested. Clara noticed how Nathan was greeted everywhere with respect. Not deference exactly, but the acknowledgement given to a man whose word meant something. "Mr. Cole!" The banker, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, waved from the doorway of his establishment. "Might I have a word?" Nathan glanced at Clara. "Will you be all right at the mercantile for a few minutes?" "Of course." Clara watched him cross the street, his long stride purposeful, and felt a peculiar flutter in her chest. It wasn't love. She wasn't fool enough to confuse gratitude and growing respect for that, but it was something. Appreciation, perhaps, for the kind of man who kept his word even when it would have been easier not to. She was examining fabric samples when she heard the whispers behind her. "That's her, isn't it? The mail-order bride?" "I heard the wedding was called off. Maybe he discovered something unsavory about her past. Or maybe she discovered ranch life wasn't as romantic as she'd imagined. City girls never last out here." Claire's cheeks burned, but she kept her attention on the fabric, refusing to give the gossips the satisfaction of a reaction. Let them speculate. Nathan was right. It was nobody's business but theirs. I think it's romantic, a younger voice chimed in. Maybe they're taking time to truly know each other before committing. That shows maturity. Or scandal, the first voice countered darkly. Clara selected a bolt of sturdy blue cotton and carried it to the counter, where Mr. Patterson waited with a sympathetic smile that suggested he'd heard the whispers too. Don't mind them, Miss Whitmore, he said quietly as he measured out the fabric. Small town, small minds sometimes. Mr. Cole's a good man, and anyone he chooses is good enough for this town. The kindness in his words nearly undid her. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. When Nathan returned, his expression was troubled. He loaded their supplies into the wagon with unusual terseness, helped Clara aboard without his customary courtesy, and urged the horses into a trot that suggested he wanted distance from town as quickly as possible. What did the banker want? Clara asked once they were clear of the buildings. Nathan's jaw tightened. There's been some trouble with cattle rustling in the territory. He wanted to warn me to keep extra watch on the herd. 3 ranches have lost stock in the past month. That's serious. Very. Cattle are our livelihood. Losing even a dozen head could mean the difference between profit and loss for the year. He glanced at her. I'll need to ride out more, check the herds more frequently. It means less time at the house. I understand. Is there anything I can do to help? Keep the accounts current. If we do lose stock, I'll need accurate numbers quickly. Nathan hesitated. And Clara? Be cautious if you're out alone. Rustlers aren't usually violent, but desperate men do desperate things. Stay close to the house when I'm gone. The concern in his voice warmed Clara more than she wanted to admit. I will. I promise. The rustling threat cast a shadow over the following days. Nathan rode out before dawn and often didn't return until after dark, exhausted and worried. Clara saw little of him except at mealtimes when he was usually too tired for conversation beyond basic updates. The easy rhythm they'd established was disrupted, replaced by tension and uncertainty. Clara filled the void with work. She helped Mrs. Henley preserve the last of the autumn vegetables, reorganized the root cellar, took over more of the household accounts. In the evenings, alone in the parlor, she found herself touching Nathan's mother's necklace. She'd started wearing it, finally, after Nathan had quietly suggested she should. It felt like a talisman, a tangible reminder of what she was working toward. One night, nearly a month after her confession, Nathan came home later than usual. Clara heard him in the kitchen, speaking in low tones with Mrs. Henley, and something in the timbre of his voice made her set aside her mending and go investigate. Nathan sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee untouched before him, his face drawn with exhaustion and something darker. Mrs. Henley hovered nearby, wringing her hands. What's happened? Clara asked from the doorway. Nathan looked up, and Clara saw defeat in his eyes. We lost 30 head, maybe more. Found the trail this afternoon. They drove them south, probably crossing into Colorado by now. 30 head. Clara had been managing the books long enough to understand what that meant. Thousands of dollars, gone. Months of work, vanished. The difference between a profitable year and potential ruin. Can you track them? Get them back? Not without more men than I can spare, and even then, Nathan scrubbed a hand over his face. The sheriff's been notified, but cattle rustling is hard to prosecute, even when you catch the thieves. By the time anyone moves on it, those cattle will be sold off, brands altered, scattered across a dozen different ranches. Mrs. Henley made a sympathetic sound. You should eat something, Mr. Cole. You won't solve anything on an empty stomach. I'm not hungry. Nathan stood abruptly. I need to update the accounts, figure out exactly where this leaves us financially. I can help, Clara offered. I've been keeping everything current. For a moment, Nathan looked like he wanted to refuse, to shoulder the burden alone as he seemed determined to do with everything. Then something in his expression shifted, and he nodded wearily. All right, thank you. They worked in Nathan's study until well past midnight. Clara pulled out the ledgers while Nathan provided the updated cattle count, and together they calculated the loss. It was worse than Clara had feared. The rustled cattle represented nearly a quarter of Nathan's expected profit for the year. Combined with some unexpected expenses earlier in the season, it left the ranch financially strained, not ruined, but vulnerable. We'll survive it, Nathan said finally, staring at the numbers. But there's no room for error now. We'll need to be careful with every expenditure, hope for good prices at market. Pray we don't lose any more stock. Clara studied his face in the lamplight. He looked older than his 32 years, worn down by responsibility and disappointment. On impulse, she reached across the desk and covered his hand with hers. "We'll manage," she said firmly. "You're not alone in this." Nathan's eyes met hers, surprised and something else. Grateful, maybe, or simply too tired to maintain his usual reserve. "I appreciate that. More than you know." They sat like that for a moment, hands touching across the ledger, before Nathan pulled back and stood. "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow won't be any easier." Clara wanted to argue, to offer more comfort, but she recognized dismissal when she heard it. Nathan needed to process this loss alone, in whatever way he managed such things. So she simply nodded and left him there, hunched over his accounts in the flickering lamplight. The loss of the cattle changed something fundamental between them. Nathan became more closed off, more burdened, spending even longer hours riding the property and checking the remaining herd. Clara saw the worry etched into every line of his face, heard it in the terse way he spoke to the hands, felt it in the tension that pervaded the ranch like an invisible weight. And she felt helpless. All her careful work on the accounts, all her efforts to prove herself useful, none of it mattered against 30 head of stolen cattle and the financial strain they represented. She was managing the numbers, but she couldn't create money that wasn't there. 2 weeks after the rustling, Clara was working in the kitchen when she heard horses approaching at speed. Through the window, she saw Nathan and two of his hands riding hard toward the house. Something was wrong. She could tell by the urgency in their movements, the way Nathan was already dismounting before his horse fully stopped. He burst through the door, his face flushed and his eyes wild. "Where's Mrs. Henley?" "In town for supplies. She won't be back until evening. What's wrong?" One of the hands, Jack, he was thrown, hit his head hard. He's unconscious. Nathan was already moving toward the stairs. "I need to get him settled, and we need to send for the doctor." Clara followed him outside, where two men were carefully lifting an unconscious figure from a horse. The injured man, Jack, apparently, a quiet hand Clara had spoken with only a few times, had blood matted in his hair and an unnatural pallor to his skin. "Bring him to the spare room," Clara directed, her mind racing. She'd nursed her parents through their final illness, had tended neighbors' children through fevers and injuries. It wasn't much experience, but it was more than standing helpless. "Nathan, send someone for the doctor immediately, and bring me clean water, cloths, and the medicine box." For a moment, Nathan looked like he might argue. This was his ranch, his responsibility. Then he saw something in Clara's expression that made him nod. "Tom, ride for Doc Harrison. Fast as you can. Sam, help me with the water." They got Jack settled in bed while Clara examined his head wound. It was deep, but not as bad as the blood suggested. Head wounds always bled dramatically. The real concern was the unconsciousness. How hard had he hit, and what damage might be hidden beneath the skin? Nathan returned with water and cloths, hovering anxiously. Will he? "I don't know," Claire said honestly, already cleaning the wound. "But he's breathing steadily, and his pulse is strong. Those are good signs. We need to keep him still and watch for fever or convulsions." "You know what to do?" "Some. I'm no doctor, but I've tended injuries before." She met Nathan's eyes. "I'll do my best for him." Nathan nodded jerkily. "I need to get back out there. We were moving cattle when it happened, and we can't leave them scattered, but if anything changes—" "I'll send someone immediately." He left reluctantly, and Clara settled in to wait. She kept Jack's wound clean, monitored his breathing, spoke to him softly, even though he couldn't hear at Mrs. Henley returned before the doctor, bustling in with supplies and taking over the nursing with practiced efficiency. But she praised Clara's work. "You did exactly right, dear. Head wounds are tricky things, but you kept calm and did what needed doing." The doctor arrived as evening fell. He examined Jack thoroughly, declared Clara's treatment sound, and confirmed there was nothing to do but wait and watch. Head injuries were unpredictable. Jack might wake in an hour or a day, or not at all. Nathan returned after dark to find Clara still sitting with the unconscious hand. "You should rest." "So should you." He almost smiled at that. "Fair point." He sank into the chair beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Thank you for knowing what to do, for not panicking. I just did what needed doing. That's becoming a habit with you. Nathan's voice was soft, almost wondering. Every time I think I know what to expect from you, you surprise me. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm just trying to be useful. You're more than useful, Clara. He paused, searching for words. You're exactly what I needed, what this ranch needed, even if I didn't realize it. The moment stretched between them, fragile and significant. Clara was acutely aware of Nathan's proximity, the warmth radiating from his body, the way his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then Jack stirred, groaning, and the moment shattered. They both turned to the injured man, who blinked groggily and tried to sit up. Easy, Clara soothed, pressing him back down. You've had a nasty fall. Don't move too quickly. Jack's eyes focused on her, then on Nathan. Boss? What happened? Your horse spooked. You hit your head. Nathan's relief was palpable. How do you feel? Like I went 10 rounds with a bull and lost. The fact that he could joke was a good sign. Clara checked his pupils, asked him basic questions to assess his coherence, and finally pronounced him likely to survive with nothing worse than a headache. After Jack fell back into natural sleep, Nathan walked Clara to the kitchen. Mrs. Henley had left soup warming and bread on the table before retiring to her room. They sat across from each other, eating in comfortable silence. I've been thinking, Nathan said finally, setting down his spoon, about us, about the arrangement. Claire's heart stuttered. Yes? It's been almost 6 weeks since you told me the truth. 6 weeks of watching how you handle yourself, how you respond to challenges, who you are when you're not trying to impress anyone. He met her eyes. I think I've seen enough. This was it. The decision Clara had been both dreading and hoping for. She set down her own spoon, her hands trembling slightly. And I think we should set a new wedding date. Relief and joy flooded through Clara so intensely she felt lightheaded. You're sure? I'm sure. Nathan's expression was serious but warm. You've proven yourself in every way that matters. You're capable, honest when it counts, and you don't fall apart when things get difficult. That's what I need in a partner. That's what I want in a wife. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I won't let you down, I promise. I know you won't. Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. 2 weeks from Saturday? That gives us time to make proper arrangements, notify people. We'll do it right this time. 2 weeks, Clara agreed, squeezing his hand. Yes. She went to bed that night feeling lighter than she had since arriving in Wyoming. The lie had been confessed, the trust rebuilt, the future secured. In 2 weeks she would marry Nathan Cole and begin the life she'd come west to find. But fate, Clara was about to learn, had other plans. The trouble started 3 days before the wedding. Nathan had ridden out early to check the southern boundary, and Clara was helping Mrs. Henley bake bread when they heard a commotion outside. Through the window, Clara saw a wagon she didn't recognize, and a woman being helped down by one of the ranch hands. The woman was elegant despite obvious travel fatigue, perhaps 40, with dark hair swept up in an elaborate style and a dress that spoke of money and taste. She looked around the ranch with an expression that managed to be both imperious and disappointed. "Who is that?" Clara asked. Mrs. Henley's face had gone pale. "Oh dear, oh no, that's Mrs. Margaret Cole, Nathan's aunt from Boston." Clara's stomach dropped. His aunt? He never mentioned... They're not close. She disapproved of his father's choice to ranch out west, tried to convince Nathan to sell the place and move back east after his father died. They haven't spoken in years. This didn't sound good. Clara wiped flour from her hands and went to greet their unexpected guest. Up close, Mrs. Margaret Cole was even more formidable. Sharp-eyed and aristocratic, with the kind of bearing that came from generations of Boston society. "You must be the mail-order bride," Mrs. Cole said without preamble. "I'm Margaret Cole, Nathan's aunt. Where is my nephew?" "Out checking the herd, ma'am. He should return by mid-afternoon. I'm Clara Whitmore, and you're very welcome to... I'll wait inside." Mrs. Cole swept past Clara into the house, her critical gaze taking in everything. "Mrs. Henley, still here, I see. Good. At least some standards are being maintained. The afternoon that followed was excruciating. Mrs. Cole held court in the parlor, drinking tea and asking Clara questions that felt less like polite inquiry and more like interrogation. Where was Clara from? What was her family background, her education, her breeding? Clara answered as honestly as she could, feeling each response fall short of whatever standard Mrs. Cole was measuring against. Philadelphia boarding house, orphaned at 16, basic education, no family connections worth mentioning. She could see the disapproval mounting in the older woman's expression. When Nathan finally returned, Clara saw him freeze on the porch, visible through the window. His face went through a complicated series of expressions: surprise, dismay, resignation, before he squared his shoulders and entered. "Aunt Margaret, this is unexpected." Clearly, Mrs. Cole rose and Nathan dutifully kissed her cheek. "When I heard through mutual acquaintances that you were planning to marry some unknown woman you'd ordered through the mail like a piece of furniture, I knew I had to come intervene." Nathan's expression hardened. "There's nothing to intervene in. Claire and I are marrying in 3 days." "So I've been informed." "Nathan, really? A mail-order bride? You couldn't find a suitable woman through proper channels? Your father would be appalled." "My father would have liked Clara very much," Nathan said firmly. "She's exactly the kind of woman he'd have respected. Hardworking, capable, honest." Mrs. Cole's eyebrow arched. "Honest? How interesting. Tell me, Miss Whitmore, exactly how old are you?" The question landed like a physical blow. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. How could Mrs. Cole possibly know? "I'm 19, Clara said quietly. Nathan's head whipped toward her, confusion in his eyes. Clara realized with horror that he'd misunderstood. He thought she was confirming the truth they'd already addressed. He didn't realize his aunt was about to weaponize it. 19, Mrs. Cole repeated with satisfaction. "And yet, Nathan, I have here a copy of the letter she sent in response to your advertisement. Shall I read the relevant passage?" She produced a paper from her reticule with theatrical flourish. "I am 25 years of age. Curious, isn't it, how 6 years simply vanished?" The silence that followed was deafening. Clara watched Nathan's face transform, confusion giving way to comprehension, comprehension to betrayal. He thought she'd lied again. He thought she'd been lying this entire time, and only his aunt's arrival had exposed the truth. "Nathan, no. I told you. We discussed this." Clara started desperately. "You told him?" Mrs. Cole's smile was sharp. "How convenient. After being caught, I suppose. Nathan, surely you see what kind of woman this is. She lied to trap you into marriage, and when caught, she lied about coming clean. She's a fortune hunter, clearly." "That's not true." Clara turned to Nathan, pleading. "I confessed the truth 6 weeks ago, before we set the wedding date. You know this? We talked about it in your study. We agreed to postpone the wedding." But Nathan's face had gone carefully blank, the way it did when he was processing something painful. Clara realized with growing horror that to an outsider, her story sounded absurd. Why would Nathan postpone a wedding over something they'd already discussed? Why would he give her a second chance if the lie was as serious as Mrs. Cole was making it sound? "Nathan, please. You have to believe me." "How did you get that letter?" Nathan asked his aunt quietly. "I have my sources. When I heard about this ill-advised marriage, I made inquiries." Mrs. Cole's expression was triumphant. "I'm trying to protect you, Nathan. This woman is clearly manipulating you. She lied about her age, undoubtedly lied about other things. You can't trust anything she says." "I did lie," Clara said, her voice breaking. "I lied in my letters. But I told Nathan the truth weeks ago. I confessed everything. That's why we postponed the wedding, to rebuild trust. He knows this. Nathan, tell her." Nathan stood frozen, his eyes moving between Clara and his aunt. Clara could see the war in his expression, wanting to believe her, but confronted with damning evidence and his aunt's manipulative certainty. "The postponement," Mrs. Cole continued relentlessly, "was undoubtedly because you discovered something about her character, perhaps another lie? And she convinced you to give her another chance with more lies. Nathan, I know you want to believe the best in people, but this woman is deceiving you." "No," Clara said desperately. No, that's not... Nathan, please. You know me. You know I told you the truth. We've spent 6 weeks rebuilding trust. You said yourself you'd seen enough to be certain. Don't let her poison that. Nathan's jaw worked. When he finally spoke, his voice was frighteningly calm. Aunt Margaret, I'd like to speak with Clara privately. Mrs. Henley will show you to a guest room. Nathan, I really think... Privately, Nathan repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Mrs. Cole sniffed, but allowed Mrs. Henley to lead her away. The moment they were alone, Nathan turned to Clara, and she saw something in his eyes that terrified her. Not anger. She could have handled anger, but doubt. After everything they'd built, everything she'd proven, his aunt had planted doubt. Tell me again, Nathan said quietly. Tell me exactly what happened, from the beginning. And Clara did, her voice shaking but steady. She recounted the confession in his study, his decision to postpone the wedding, the weeks of rebuilding trust, his proposal 3 days ago to set a new date. All of it tumbling out in desperate honesty. When she finished, Nathan was silent for a long moment. You did tell me, he said finally. I remember. All of it. Relief crashed through Clara. Then you believe me. I believe you told me about the lie. Nathan's voice was heavy. What I'm struggling with is why my aunt has evidence that makes your confession look like damage control. How did she get that letter, Clara? And why does she think you only admitted the lie after being caught? I don't know how she got it. Maybe she has connections in Philadelphia. Maybe she hired someone to investigate. As for why she thinks I only confessed after being caught, Clara's voice cracked. She's deliberately misrepresenting the timeline to make me look worse. Can't you see that? What I see, Nathan said slowly, is my aunt, whatever her faults, trying to protect me from someone she perceives as a threat. And I see you, who I want to trust, but who did lie to me once already. How do I know there aren't other lies? Other things you haven't told me? The words felt like a knife between Clara's ribs. After everything? After 6 weeks of proving myself, of being completely honest, of doing everything you asked? You still doubt me? I don't want to doubt you, Nathan said, and Clara heard the anguish in his voice. But Clara, you have to understand how this looks. My aunt arrives with evidence of your deception, and you claim you already told me about it weeks ago. If that's true, why did I forgive something so serious? Why did I agree to marry you anyway? From the outside, it looks like either you're lying now, or I'm a fool who was manipulated. You're not a fool. You made a reasoned decision based on my honesty and my actions. Clara's hands clenched into fists. And I am not lying, not now, not anymore. Everything I've done since that confession has been in service of earning back your trust. Doesn't that count for anything? Nathan turned away from her, his shoulders bowed. I don't know what to believe anymore. And Clara realized that this was what his aunt had intended all along. Not to prove Clara was lying, but to plant enough doubt that Nathan couldn't trust his own judgment, to make him question everything they'd built together. She'd lost. After confessing, after working so hard, after finally securing their future, she'd lost it all to a manipulative aunt and unfortunate timing. What do you want me to do? Clara asked quietly. Tell me what I can do to prove I'm telling the truth. Nathan's silence was answer enough. There was nothing she could do. The doubt was there, planted and growing, and all her words couldn't uproot it. I need time to think, Nathan said finally. I need to talk to my aunt, understand how she got that letter, and what else she knows. And I need space to figure out what I believe. The wedding is in 3 days. I know. Nathan's voice was hollow. I'll let you know my decision before then. He walked out, leaving Clara alone in the parlor with the ruins of their almost marriage scattered around her like broken glass. She sank into a chair, feeling the weight of defeat settle over her shoulders. She'd told the truth. She'd done everything right. And it still wasn't enough. Because the worst lies, Clara was learning, weren't the ones you told. They were the ones other people told about you, poisoning trust you'd worked so hard to build, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in the blue bedroom that had become hers, staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed every moment of the confrontation with Mrs. Cole. The older woman's triumphant expression, Nathan's wounded doubt, the careful way he'd withdrawn from Clara as though she were a stranger again. All the trust they'd built, all the progress they'd made, demolished in an afternoon by a woman who'd never even met her before today. The unfairness of it burned in Clara's chest like acid. When dawn finally came, pale and cold through the window, Clara rose and dressed with mechanical precision. She braided her hair, smoothed her skirt, and fastened Nathan's mother's necklace around her throat. If this was to be her last day at Clearwater Ranch, she would face it with whatever dignity she could muster. Downstairs, she found Mrs. Henley already in the kitchen, her kind face creased with worry. The housekeeper took one look at Clara and pulled her into a fierce embrace. "That woman," Mrs. Henley said vehemently, "is poison, always has been. Tried to convince Mr. Cole's father to give up ranching and move back east, told him he was wasting his life and his son's future out here. When that didn't work, she cut them off entirely, hasn't spoken to Nathan in 5 years, and now she shows up acting like she has his best interests at heart. It's about control, dear, always has been." Clara sank into a chair at the kitchen table. "It doesn't matter what her motives are. She's planted doubt, and I can't uproot it. Nathan doesn't know what to believe anymore." "Then you remind him." Mrs. Henley set a cup of coffee in front of Clara with more force than necessary. "You remind him of every honest conversation you've had, every time you've proven yourself, every reason he decided to trust you in the first place. You don't just give up." "I've tried. He needs time to think." "What he needs," Mrs. Henley said firmly, "is someone to remind him that his aunt is a manipulative harridan who's never wanted his happiness. But men can be stubborn about family, even family that doesn't deserve their loyalty." Clara wrapped her hands around the warm cup, drawing what comfort she could from it. "What if he decides she's right? What if he chooses to believe I'm still lying? Then he's a fool, and you're better off without him." Mrs. Henley's voice softened. "But I don't think he's a fool, dear. I think he's hurt and confused, and that wretched woman has twisted things to make him doubt his own judgment. Give him time. Not much, the wedding's in 3 days, but enough to work through it." Clara wanted to believe her, but the memory of Nathan's face last night, the careful blankness, the withdrawal, made hope feel like a luxury she couldn't afford. She was helping Mrs. Henley with breakfast preparations when she heard voices from the direction of Nathan's study. One was Nathan's deep rumble, the other Mrs. Cole's clipped Boston accent. Clara couldn't make out words, but the tone was heated. "They've been at it since dawn," Mrs. Henley muttered. "I heard them when I came down. That woman won't let it rest." Clara focused on slicing bread, trying not to think about what Nathan's aunt might be saying. More poison, undoubtedly. More reasons why Clara was unsuitable, untrustworthy, using him for security and status. The worst part was that some of it was true. Clara had been desperate for security when she'd answered Nathan's advertisement. She had lied to make herself seem more suitable. Those facts couldn't be denied, no matter how much her motives had changed since arriving. The study door opened, and Clara heard footsteps in the hall. She braced herself, but it was Mrs. Cole who appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression victorious. "Miss Whitmore, how domestic. Tell me, is this performance for my benefit, or have you actually been playing housewife all this time?" Clara set down the knife carefully. "I've been helping Mrs. Henley because that's what partners do. They contribute." "Partners?" Mrs. Cole's laugh was sharp. "Is that what you call someone who traps a man with lies? Nathan is finally seeing sense. He's realized that a woman who would lie about something as fundamental as her age cannot be trusted with his home, his future, or his legacy." "You don't know anything about me or what Nathan and I have built together." "I know enough. I know you're a fortune hunter who saw an advertisement and crafted whatever story you thought would appeal to a lonely rancher. I know you're 19 years old pretending to be a mature woman of 25. I know you're utterly unsuitable for someone of Nathan's standing." Mrs. Henley made an indignant sound, but Clara held up a hand, her own anger finally cutting through the despair. "You're right. I did lie about my age. I was desperate and frightened, and I made a terrible choice. But I confessed that lie weeks ago, before any wedding was planned, because I couldn't live with the deception. Nathan gave me a second chance because he saw that I was willing to be honest when it mattered. We've spent weeks rebuilding trust, and we both decided the marriage was worth pursuing. That's the truth, whether you choose to believe it or not." How convenient that this confession only comes up after I've exposed you. I confessed 6 weeks ago. Clara's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. Ask Mrs. Henley. Ask any of the ranch hands. They all knew the wedding was postponed. They all knew we were taking time to rebuild trust. This isn't some story I invented yesterday. This is documented reality. Mrs. Cole's expression flickered with uncertainty for the first time. Mrs. Henley, is this true? The housekeeper crossed her arms. Every word. Miss Whitmore told Mr. Cole the truth about her age 6 weeks ago. He postponed the wedding, told everyone it was to give them both time to be certain. They've been rebuilding trust ever since, and 3 days ago, he asked her to set a new date. I was there for most of it. Then Nathan is an even greater fool than I thought, for giving such a fundamental deception. Or, Clara said quietly, he understands that people make mistakes when they're desperate, and what matters is having the courage to correct them. That's called grace, Mrs. Cole. Perhaps it's not something you're familiar with. The older woman's eyes narrowed. You have a sharp tongue for someone in such a precarious position. I have an honest tongue, which is more than I can say for someone who shows up uninvited to sabotage her nephew's happiness. I am trying to protect him from making a disastrous mistake. No, Clara said, something crystallizing in her mind. You're trying to control him, just like you tried to control his father. You can't stand that Nathan built a life out here that doesn't include you, doesn't need your approval or your Boston connections. So you show up under the guise of concern, but really you just want to prove that you know better, that he needs you after all. Mrs. Cole's face flushed with anger. How dare you? I dare because I have nothing left to lose. Clara stood, facing the older woman squarely. You've already poisoned Nathan's trust in me. The wedding will probably be called off permanently. I'll likely be on the next stage back east. But before I go, I want you to know that I see exactly what you are. A lonely, controlling woman who drove away her own family and now wants to destroy her nephew's chance at happiness because she can't stand to see him succeed without her. The silence that followed was profound. Mrs. Henley looked shocked. Mrs. Cole looked apoplectic. And from the doorway, Nathan's voice said quietly, Clara's right. Everyone turned. Nathan stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable, but his posture tense. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? Nathan, Mrs. Cole began, but he held up a hand. Clara's right about you, Aunt Margaret, about why you're really here. Nathan's voice was calm but edged with steel. I've spent the night reviewing everything. The timeline of Clara's confession, the postponed wedding, the weeks we spent rebuilding trust. I've also been thinking about your sudden appearance now, after 5 years of silence. You haven't cared about my life or my choices for half a decade. But the moment you hear I'm marrying someone you haven't approved, you show up to interfere. I'm trying to protect you from a fortune hunter. Clara isn't a fortune hunter. Nathan's gaze shifted to Clara, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not doubt, but certainty. She's a woman who made a mistake out of desperation and had the courage to correct it. She confessed her lie, knowing it might cost her everything. She's worked for weeks to prove herself trustworthy. And I was fool enough to doubt her because you showed up with evidence I'd already seen and pretended it was new information. Mrs. Cole's mouth opened and closed. But the letter proves she lied initially. I already knew that. She told me herself. What your dramatic revelation actually proved was that you went to considerable effort to dig up dirt on a woman you'd never met, all to satisfy your need for control. Nathan's expression hardened. That's not protection, Aunt Margaret. That's manipulation. I won't stand here and be insulted by some child you're planning to marry. Clara is 19, not a child, and she's shown more maturity and integrity in the past 6 weeks than you've shown in the past 5 years. Nathan moved to stand beside Clara, a gesture of solidarity that made her throat tighten. The wedding will proceed as planned, 3 days from now. You're welcome to attend if you can be civil, otherwise I'll arrange for your passage back to Boston. Mrs. Cole drew herself up with wounded dignity. You're making a terrible mistake, Nathan. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Nathan's voice gentled slightly. I'm sorry you can't support this, but I won't let you sabotage it either. Clara is going to be my wife, and that's final. For a moment, Clara thought Mrs. Cole might continue arguing, but something in Nathan's stance, the absolute certainty, the protective way he'd positioned himself, made the older woman realize she'd lost. She gathered her skirts and swept from the kitchen with as much dignity as she could muster. "I'll be leaving on the morning stage," she announced. "When this marriage falls apart, don't expect me to help you pick up the pieces." Nathan waited until her footsteps faded up the stairs before turning to Clara. "I'm sorry. I should have trusted you from the start. I should have realized what she was doing." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You had every right to doubt. She presented convincing evidence, and I did lie to you once before. You confessed that lie. You did everything right to earn back my trust, and the moment someone challenged it, I let doubt creep back in." Nathan took her hands, his expression earnest and pained. "I failed you, Clara. After everything you've done to prove yourself, I should have defended you immediately. You're defending me now. Now isn't good enough. You deserve better than that moment of doubt." He squeezed her hands. "I want you to know something. I believe you. Completely. Not because I have to, not because the wedding is in 3 days, but because I've seen who you are when you think no one's watching. I've seen your character, your integrity, your willingness to do hard things because they're right. That's not something someone can fake for 6 weeks." Clara's composure finally broke. She pulled her hands free and covered her face, shoulders shaking with the force of her relief and exhaustion and lingering fear. Nathan's arms came around her, solid and warm, and she let herself lean into his strength. "I was so scared," she whispered against his chest. "I thought I'd lost everything again." "You haven't lost anything. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Nathan's voice rumbled through his chest. "We're going to get married in 3 days, and we're going to build the life we planned, together." Mrs. Henley, who'd been watching with tearful approval, cleared her throat. "I'll just go check on something, upstairs, far away from here." She bustled out, leaving them alone. Clara pulled back enough to look up at Nathan's face. "What changed your mind? What made you realize your aunt was manipulating you?" "Several things. First, I reviewed my own memories. The timeline you described matched exactly what I remembered. Your confession, the postponement, the rebuilding. If you were lying, you'd have to have somehow altered my memories, which seemed unlikely." A faint smile touched his lips. "Second, I thought about your behavior these past weeks. You've been completely honest, sometimes uncomfortably so. You've asked questions you didn't have to ask, admitted uncertainties you could have hidden. That's not the behavior of someone running a con. And third, I thought about what you said to my aunt. You called her out with nothing to gain and everything to lose. You weren't trying to manipulate or convince. You were just angry and honest. And I realized that's who you've been all along, honest, even when it costs you." Clara touched the necklace at her throat. "I've been wearing this since you gave it to me. It felt like a promise I had to live up to." Nathan's expression softened. "It was a promise. Of trust, of partnership, of building something together. I'm sorry I forgot that, even for a moment." "You remembered when it mattered." Clara managed a watery smile. "That's what counts." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms while the morning light strengthened through the kitchen window. Clara felt the last of her fear dissolve, replaced by something warmer and more enduring. Not quite love, not yet, but the solid foundation from which love might grow. "So," Nathan said eventually, 3 days until the wedding. "Think you can put up with me for a lifetime?" "I think I can manage," Clara said. "As long as you can put up with a 19-year-old who occasionally makes terrible decisions. Terrible decisions that you have the courage to fix. I can live with that." Nathan pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle and brief. "We should probably make sure my aunt actually leaves tomorrow. I wouldn't put it past her to try one more manipulation." But Mrs. Cole, it seemed, had accepted defeat. She remained in her room for the rest of the day, taking meals there and avoiding everyone. The next morning, Nathan drove her to town personally to catch the stage back east. When he returned, he looked lighter somehow, as though a weight had been lifted. "She tried one last time, he told Clara as they walked toward the creek that evening. "Said I was throwing away my heritage for a girl who'd never fit into proper society. I told her my heritage was this ranch and the life I'm building here, and Clara fits into that perfectly." What did she say to that? Nothing. I think she finally understood that she has no power here. This is my life, my choice, my future. Nathan picked up a smooth stone and sent it skipping across the water. I also told her that if she wanted to be part of my life going forward, she needed to accept my decisions, including my wife. Do you think she will? Eventually, maybe. Aunt Margaret likes control, but she also hates being alone. Give her a few years and she might decide accepting you is better than having no family at all. He glanced at Clara. Would you be all right with that, if she tried to reconcile someday? Clara considered. I think so. As long as she understands that I'm your partner, not some interloper she can undermine, and as long as you remember whose side you're on. Always yours, Nathan said simply. That's what marriage means. We face the world together, united. Everything else comes second. The certainty in his voice filled Clara with warmth. This was what she'd been hoping for when she'd answered his advertisement. Not just security or stability, but partnership. Someone who would stand beside her when the world turned hostile, who would choose her even when it was difficult. She'd lied to get here, true, but she'd also confessed that lie and done the hard work of earning back trust. And now, 3 days before their wedding, Clara finally believed they were building something real, something that would last. The next 2 days passed in a flurry of preparation. Mrs. Henley threw herself into wedding planning with renewed enthusiasm, determined to make the ceremony perfect, despite the abbreviated timeline. Neighbors brought food and well wishes, and Clara found herself welcomed by the community with genuine warmth. The night before the wedding, Clara sat with Mrs. Henley in the parlor, hemming the simple cream-colored dress she would wear tomorrow. It wasn't elaborate, they hadn't had time for anything fancy, but it was pretty, with lace at the collar and cuffs that Mrs. Henley had added with her own skilled hands. "You're nervous," Mrs. Henley observed, watching Clara's careful stitches. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows what to look for." The older woman smiled. "It's natural to be nervous. Marriage is a big step, even when you're certain it's right." Clara set down her sewing. "Do you think Nathan and I will be happy?" "Really happy? I mean, not just content or satisfied?" Mrs. Henley was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think you have something better than happiness. You have honesty. You've seen each other at your worst, him doubting you, you deceiving him, and you've chosen to move forward together anyway. That's stronger than happiness, which comes and goes. That's commitment." Nathan said something similar, about partnership being more important than romance. He's not wrong. Though I wouldn't discount romance entirely. Mrs. Henley's expression turned wistful. "My Henry and I started much like you and Nathan. Practical arrangement, mutual respect, shared purpose. But over the years, that grew into something deeper. We learned each other's rhythms, understood each other's silences, built a life that was more than the sum of its parts. That's what I see possible for you two, if you're patient." "How long did it take for you and Henry?" "For the deep love? Years. But for contentment, for genuine partnership, that came much sooner. We were lucky, I suppose. We liked each other from the start, which isn't always the case in arranged marriages." Mrs. Henley reached over and patted Clara's hand. "You and Nathan like each other. I've seen it in the way you talk, the way you work together, the way you defend each other. That's a good foundation. The rest will come in its own time." Clara hoped she was right. She'd come to care for Nathan over these weeks, his quiet strength, his unwavering principles, the gentle way he treated animals and people alike. It wasn't the passionate love of poetry or romance novels, but it was real and growing. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was even better than the alternative. That night, lying in bed for the last time as Clara Whitmore, she thought about all the moments that had led her here, the desperation that had driven her to lie, the fear that had almost made her lose everything, the courage she'd found to confess the truth. She thought about Nathan's doubt and his ultimate faith, about Mrs. Cole's manipulation and Nathan's defense, about the partnership they were choosing to build together. Tomorrow, she would marry Nathan Cole. She would become Clara Cole, partner in a cattle ranch, mistress of a house she'd learned to love, member of a community that had cautiously accepted her. It was more than she'd dared hope for when she'd boarded that stagecoach in Philadelphia, more than she'd thought possible when she'd written those deceptive letters. But it was also exactly what she'd needed, though she hadn't known it then. Not just security or stability, but the chance to become someone better than the desperate girl who'd lied to survive. The chance to prove that mistakes could be overcome, that trust could be rebuilt, that honesty, even when it came late, was always the right choice. Clara touched the necklace at her throat one last time before removing it to sleep. Tomorrow, she would wear it as a married woman, as Nathan's wife, as someone who'd earned her place through confession and hard work, an unwavering commitment to doing better. The thought filled her with something that felt remarkably like peace. The wedding morning dawned clear and bright, autumn sun spilling golden across the prairie. Clara woke early and dressed with trembling hands, Mrs. Henley fussing over her like a mother hen. The cream dress fit perfectly, the lace collar soft against her throat. When Mrs. Henley fastened the necklace, Nathan's mother's necklace, now Clara's, around her neck, Clara felt the weight of it as both responsibility and belonging. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Henley said, tears in her eyes. "Truly beautiful." The ceremony was held at the small church in town, attended by neighbors and ranch hands, and the few people in the territory who mattered to Nathan. Clara walked down the aisle without a father to give her away, but she didn't feel alone. Mrs. Henley sat in the front row, beaming. The ranch hands stood awkwardly in their best clothes, nodding approval. And at the altar, Nathan waited. He wore a suit Clara had never seen before, dark and formal, clearly saved for special occasions. His hair was neatly trimmed, his jaw freshly shaved, his eyes steady on hers as she approached. When she reached him, he took her hands and smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his usually serious face. The minister, the same one who would have married them weeks ago, spoke about commitment and partnership, about building a life together through trials and triumphs. Clara heard the words but was more focused on Nathan's hands holding hers, the promise in his eyes, the solid reality of this moment she'd almost lost. When the minister asked Nathan for his vows, Nathan cleared his throat and spoke directly to Clara, ignoring the watching crowd. "Clara, I promise to trust you, even when it's hard, to stand beside you, even when others doubt, to build our life together with honesty and respect, to remember that we're partners in all things and that your strength is my strength, your struggles are mine to share. I choose you today and every day after, for as long as we both live." Clara's throat tightened with emotion. When it was her turn, she spoke the words she'd rehearsed, but also added something spontaneous. "Nathan, I promise to be worthy of your trust, to be honest even when it costs me, to work beside you in building something that outlasts us both, to remember that love isn't just measured in years but in moments, and to make every moment count. I choose you, knowing all my flaws and mistakes, grateful that you chose me too." The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Nathan kissed her, brief and chaste, but warm with promise. Clara heard Mrs. Henley sniffle in the front row and saw the ranch hands grinning. As she and Nathan turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Cole, Clara felt something shift in her chest. She'd come west as Clara Whitmore, a desperate girl fleeing a hopeless situation with a lie on her lips. She was leaving as Clara Cole, a woman who'd learned that truth, however painful, was always better than deception. And that forgiveness, when earned, was the greatest gift anyone could give. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. Food and laughter at the ranch, neighbors offering congratulations and advice, the kind of community gathering that made Clara feel truly welcomed for the first time. As the sun set and guests began to leave, Nathan pulled Clara aside to the porch where they'd first talked all those weeks ago. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. Clara looked out over the ranch, the barn and corrals, the endless prairie stretching to the horizon, the home she'd almost lost and now got to keep. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the mistakes she'd made and corrected, the second chance she'd been given. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Only gratitude." Nathan pulled her close, and Clara leaned into his strength, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. They stood like that as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. Two people who'd chosen each other despite imperfect beginnings, who'd built trust from the ashes of deception, who were committed to facing whatever came next together. It wasn't the ending Clara had imagined when she'd written those lying letters. It was better, because it was real. The first weeks of marriage were an education in compromise and patience. Clara moved her few belongings from the blue bedroom into Nathan's room, their room now, and learned to navigate the intimacy of sharing space with another person. Nathan was considerate but reserved, giving her privacy when she needed it, respecting the boundaries of their still developing relationship. They were partners first, husband and wife second, and both seemed content to let the latter evolve naturally from the former. The ranch work continued as it always had, but Clara now threw herself into it with the full authority of her position. She took over the household accounts completely, organized the storage cellars for winter, worked with Mrs. Henley to preserve and prepare food for the cold months ahead. The hands quickly learned that Mrs. Cole had opinions about efficiency and waste, and that she wasn't shy about expressing them. "You're bossier than you used to be," one of the younger hands, Sam, observed one afternoon when Clara corrected his method of stacking firewood. "I'm the boss's wife now," Clara replied without apology. "That means I have a stake in everything running smoothly. Stack it properly or restack it when it falls." Sam grinned and did as he was told. Later, Clara heard him telling another hand that Mrs. Cole was tough but fair, which she decided to take as a compliment. Nathan noticed the change too. One evening, as they reviewed the week's expenses together, he set down his pencil and studied her with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You've settled in completely, like you were born to this life instead of coming to it desperate and uncertain." Nathan's voice held approval and something else, wonder, maybe. "You've become exactly what this ranch needed, what I needed." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. "I had good motivation to prove myself." "You've done more than prove yourself, you've transformed things. The accounts have never been this organized. The household runs smoother than it did even with Mrs. Henley alone, and the hands actually respect your judgment. That's remarkable." "Is this your way of saying you're glad you married me?" Clara teased gently. "This is my way of saying I'm lucky you answered my advertisement, even if you did lie about your age." Nathan's rare smile appeared. 19 or 25, you're more capable than most people I've known at any age." The compliment meant more because Nathan wasn't given to empty flattery. When he praised, it was earned and genuine. Clara reached across the desk and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, for giving me a second chance when I didn't deserve it." "You deserved it." Nathan's expression grew serious. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to correct their mistakes. You just had the courage to actually do it." As autumn deepened into winter, Clara discovered new challenges and joys in ranch life. The first snowfall was heavier than anything she'd experienced in Philadelphia, transforming the prairie into a white expanse so beautiful it made her breath catch. But beauty came with hardship. Animals needed constant care in the cold, supplies had to be carefully rationed, and the isolation Nathan had warned her about became very real as weeks passed without seeing anyone beyond the ranch. Clara didn't mind the isolation as much as she'd expected. She'd grown up in a crowded city where privacy was a luxury, and there was something deeply peaceful about the snow-muffled quiet, the crackling fire in the evenings, the simple rhythm of work and rest without the constant press of strangers. She and Nathan developed routines that felt almost ceremonial in their regularity. Morning coffee together before dawn, reviewing plans for the day. Evening walks when weather allowed, or sitting by the fire when it didn't, reading or talking or simply existing in comfortable silence. Meals with Mrs. Henley, who had become more friend than employee, offering advice and stories about Nathan's childhood that made Clara understand him better. One particularly cold evening in December, Clara was mending by firelight when Nathan looked up from his livestock journal with an odd expression. "I've been thinking," he began. Clara set down her sewing. "That sounds dangerous." He smiled briefly. "About Christmas. It's in 2 weeks, and I realized I don't know what traditions you had. What would make the day feel right for you?" The question caught Clara off guard. She hadn't thought much about Christmas since her parents died. The boarding house hadn't celebrated beyond a meager meal, and Clara had been too focused on survival to mourn the loss of holiday joy. "We used to make a special dinner," she said slowly, memory surfacing. "Nothing fancy, but my mother would save up ingredients for weeks, and my father would read stories. Not religious ones particularly, just stories about winter and magic and hope. It was simple, but it felt warm, safe. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. We could do something similar. Mrs. Henley's already planning a feast, and I've got books. We could invite a few neighbors if you want company, or keep it just us if you'd prefer quiet. Just us sounds perfect. Clara hesitated, then added, This will be my first real Christmas in years. I'd like it to be about our family, small as it is. Our family. Nathan repeated the words as though testing them. I like the sound of that. Christmas came with fresh snow and clear skies. Mrs. Henley outdid herself with dinner, roasted chicken, fresh bread, preserved vegetables prepared a dozen different ways, and a dried apple pie that tasted like childhood. After the meal, Nathan pulled out a worn volume of frontier tales and read aloud by firelight, his deep voice making the stories come alive. Clara listened with her head resting against his shoulder, Mrs. Henley dozing in her chair nearby, and felt a contentment so profound it almost frightened her. This was what she'd been searching for without knowing it, not just security or stability, but belonging. The sense that she'd found her place in the world and could finally stop running. When Nathan finished reading, he set the book aside and pulled a small wrapped package from his vest pocket. I got you something. Clara hadn't expected gifts. Nathan, we agreed not to be extravagant. This isn't extravagant. He placed the package in her hands, watching her with an expression that was almost shy. Clara unwrapped it carefully to find a small leather-bound journal, the cover tooled with an intricate pattern of wildflowers. Inside, the pages were blank and waiting. For writing down whatever you want, Nathan explained. Household records, personal thoughts, stories. I've seen how you organize everything else. Figured you might like something just for yourself. Clara ran her fingers over the soft leather, touched beyond words. It was a practical gift, but also personal, showing that Nathan paid attention to who she was and what she might value. Thank you, she whispered. It's perfect. There's more. Nathan shifted, suddenly awkward. I mean, not a gift exactly, but something I wanted to tell you. I've been thinking about the future, about what we're building here, and I realize that I want you to know you're not just my wife in name. You're my partner in every sense. That means if something happens to me, the ranch is yours. I've already updated my will to reflect that. Clara stared at him. Nathan, I know it's morbid to talk about, but it's important. You should know that you're secure here, that this is your home regardless of what happens. I never want you to feel like you're one disaster away from losing everything again. The gift of security, Clara realized, was more valuable than any physical present could be. Nathan was telling her she belonged permanently and irrevocably in a way that legal documents made real. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep organizing my accounts and telling the hands when they're doing things wrong. Nathan's smile was gentle. Say you'll keep being exactly who you are. Clara kissed him then, spontaneous and grateful, and felt him respond with a warmth that promised their partnership might indeed become something deeper given time. Winter eventually surrendered to spring, and with spring came new life and new challenges. The calving season kept everyone busy from dawn to dusk, and Clara learned to assist with difficult births, to care for orphaned calves, to make life or death decisions about animals too sick to save. It was hard work that left her exhausted and sometimes heartbroken, but it also taught her the resilience Nathan had spoken of months ago, the understanding that life on a ranch meant constant struggle against loss, and the only way forward was to keep working despite it. One morning, in late April, Clara woke feeling oddly unsettled. Her stomach churned, and the smell of Mrs. Henley's breakfast cooking made her rush outside to be sick. When it happened again the next day, and the day after that, Mrs. Henley gave her a knowing look. How long since your last monthly? The older woman asked gently. Clara had to think. With everything that had happened, the wedding, settling into marriage, the busy winter, she'd lost track. 6 weeks? Maybe 7? Mrs. Henley's smile was radiant. Oh, my dear, I think you might be carrying. The possibility hadn't even occurred to Clara. She and Nathan had been intimate but careful, or so she'd thought. The idea of a child, of being responsible for another life when she was still figuring out her own, was overwhelming. I might just be ill, Clara said weakly. Or you might be expecting. Either way, We should know for certain soon enough. Clara spent the next few days in a fog of speculation and anxiety. Should she tell Nathan her suspicions? Wait until she was certain? What if she was wrong? What if she was right? The thought of motherhood terrified her. She was only 19, barely managing her own life, and now she might be responsible for a child's entire future. She was sitting by the creek one evening, trying to sort through her tangled emotions, when Nathan found her. "You've been quiet lately," he observed, settling beside her on the bank. "And Mrs. Henley's been giving me significant looks. Should I be worried?" Clara took a breath. They'd promised honesty, always. "I might be pregnant. I'm not certain yet, but Mrs. Henley thinks it's likely." She watched Nathan's face carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. He was silent for a long moment, his expression cycling through surprise, consideration, and finally something that looked like cautious joy. "How do you feel about it?" he asked carefully. "If it's true?" "Terrified," Clara admitted. "I'm 19, Nathan. I barely know how to be a wife, let alone a mother. What if I'm terrible at it? What if I fail?" "You won't fail." Nathan's certainty was absolute. "Look at everything you've already mastered, keeping house, managing accounts, handling ranch emergencies. You learn what needs learning, and you do what needs doing. Motherhood will be the same." "You make it sound simple." "It won't be simple, but you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together, same as we figured out everything else." Nathan reached for her hand. "And Clara, I meant what I said about wanting children, about building a legacy. If you're carrying our child, I'm happy about it. Scared, maybe, but happy." Clara leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "You really think we can do this?" "I think we can do anything if we face it together." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "That's what partnership means, remember? Shared struggles, shared triumphs. This is just the next chapter." The pregnancy was confirmed a few weeks later, and Clara had 7 months to adjust to the idea of becoming a mother. Nathan proved true to his word, supporting her through the morning sickness and fatigue, taking over tasks that became too difficult as her belly grew, treating the whole process with a mixture of awe and protectiveness that Clara found endearing. Mrs. Henley was in her element, sharing wisdom from raising her own children and preparing everything needed for the baby's arrival. The neighboring women rallied around Clara with advice and gifts, welcoming her fully into their circle now that she was about to become a mother. Even the ranch hands treated her with a new careful deference, as though she'd become somehow more precious by virtue of carrying the next generation. Clara had never felt so surrounded by community, so certain of her place in the world. The baby came in late November, after a long and difficult labor that left Clara exhausted but exhilarated. Nathan paced anxiously outside while Mrs. Henley and the local midwife attended Clara, and when he was finally allowed in to meet his daughter, a tiny, red-faced creature with a surprisingly loud cry, Clara saw tears in his eyes. "She's perfect," he whispered, cradling the baby with surprising gentleness for such large hands. "Absolutely perfect." They named her Sarah, after Nathan's mother. Clara had suggested it hesitantly, worried it might be painful, but Nathan's face had lit up with gratitude and approval. Sarah Elizabeth Cole, a name that honored the past while looking toward the future. The first months of motherhood were exactly as difficult as Clara had feared, and more rewarding than she'd imagined. Sarah was demanding and exhausting, crying at all hours and requiring constant care. But she was also fascinating. Every expression, every small achievement, every sign of personality emerging felt like a miracle. Clara found herself writing in the journal Nathan had given her, documenting Sarah's development and her own thoughts about motherhood, creating a record she could share with her daughter someday. Nathan proved to be a devoted father despite his initial awkwardness. Clara would find him in the nursery at odd hours, just watching Sarah sleep, or carrying her around the ranch while explaining cattle management to an infant too young to understand. He approached fatherhood with the same serious commitment he brought to everything else, reading books about child development and consulting. Mrs. Henley about proper care. One evening when Sarah was about 3 months old, Clara woke to find Nathan's side of the bed empty. She heard soft voices from the nursery and went to investigate, finding Nathan walking the floor with a fussy Sarah, singing quietly to her. Clara had never heard Nathan sing before. His voice was surprisingly pleasant, and the tune was an old folk song about homecoming and belonging. Sarah had quieted in his arms, her small fist gripping his finger, her dark eyes, the same color as Clara's, watching his face with infant intensity. The sight made Clara's throat tighten with emotion. This was her family. The desperate girl who'd lied her way onto a stagecoach had somehow found her way here, to a home that was truly hers, to a partner who valued her, to a daughter who would never know the fear and uncertainty Clara had grown up with. "She likes your singing," Clara said softly from the doorway. Nathan looked up, not at all embarrassed to be caught. "My mother used to sing this to me, figured it might work on Sarah too." "It's working." Clara moved to join them, wrapping her arms around Nathan from behind and looking down at their daughter. "You're good at this. Better than you thought you'd be." "We both are." Nathan shifted Sarah so Clara could see her better. "Look at her, Clara. We made this. This perfect little person who's going to grow up knowing she's loved and secure. That's something." It was more than something. It was everything Clara had never had and was determined to give. Sarah would grow up with two parents who chose each other, who worked together, who built a life of honesty and partnership. She would never know the desperation that had driven Clara to lie, because her parents would ensure she never needed to. The years that followed Sarah's birth passed in a rhythm of seasons and small triumphs. Clara watched her daughter take first steps, speak first words, develop into a curious and stubborn toddler who inherited Nathan's serious nature and Clara's determination. The ranch prospered under their combined management, growing more profitable and stable with each passing year. They survived droughts and hard winters, cattle illness and market fluctuations, always working together to meet each challenge. Clara's relationship with Nathan deepened in ways she hadn't anticipated. The respectful partnership they'd built evolved into genuine affection, then something richer, not the passionate romance of storybooks, but a profound intimacy born of shared experience and unwavering support. They knew each other's rhythms and silences, could communicate with a glance, functioned as a unified team in all things. When Sarah was 3, they had a son, James, named for Nathan's father. 2 years later, another daughter they called Margaret, partly as an olive branch to Nathan's aunt, who had indeed reached out tentatively after several years of silence. The reconciliation was gradual and never complete, but Margaret Cole learned to accept Clara, if not embrace her, and the children gave them common ground. Through it all, Clara never forgot the journey that had brought her here. She kept the journal Nathan had given her, filling volume after volume with the stories of their life, the struggles and joys, the ordinary moments and extraordinary ones. She wrote about Sarah's first laugh and James's stubborn streak. She wrote about the year the creek flooded and the year they had record profits. She wrote about Nathan's quiet kindnesses and Mrs. Henley's wisdom and the community that had slowly, completely accepted her as one of their own. And sometimes, in private moments, she wrote about the girl she'd been. Desperate and frightened, alone in a hostile city, so convinced her only value lay in what lies she could tell. She wrote about the lie that had brought her west and the confession that had nearly cost her everything. She wrote about forgiveness and second chances and the slow, patient work of building trust. She wrote so she would never forget what she'd learned. That honesty, however painful, was always better than comfortable deception. That mistakes could be overcome if you had the courage to admit them. That partnership built on truth was stronger than any foundation of lies. One autumn evening, many years after that first Christmas together, Clara sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and amber. Sarah was 15 now, helping with the younger children inside. James was 12, arguing with his father about something cattle-related in the barn. Margaret, at 10, was probably reading somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. Nathan emerged from the barn and crossed the yard to join Clara on the porch, settling into the chair beside hers with a contented sigh. His hair was threaded with gray now, lines deeper around his eyes, but he was still the same steady presence he'd been the day Clara arrived. "Thinking about anything in particular?" he asked. Clara smiled. "Just counting moments." "Moments?" "You told me once that love isn't measured in years, only in moments. I was trying to count them all, every small kindness, every shared struggle, every time we chose each other. But there are too many. I've lost track." Nathan reached over and took her hand, his grip familiar and warm. Good. That means we've built something worth keeping. We have. Clara squeezed his hand. Nathan, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said years ago. He tensed slightly, old wariness surfacing. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I never properly thanked you for believing me when I confessed, for giving me a second chance, for seeing past the lie to who I actually was. You could have sent me away, and you would have been justified in doing so. But you didn't. You gave me the opportunity to prove myself, and that changed everything. Nathan was quiet for a moment. I didn't give you anything you hadn't already earned. You confessed when you didn't have to. You did the work to rebuild trust. All I did was recognize what was right in front of me. You saw potential in a desperate girl who'd lied to you. That took faith. You proved the faith wasn't misplaced. That took courage. Nathan turned to look at her fully. Clara, do you know what I remember most about that day you confessed? My crying, probably. I was a mess. Your honesty. The way you stood there and told me the truth, knowing it would likely cost you everything. Most people, when caught in a lie, try to minimize or excuse or blame circumstances. You just owned it, admitted you'd been wrong, accepted the consequences. That's when I knew you were worth the risk. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, Nathan's words had the power to move her. I'm glad you took the risk. So am I. Nathan pulled her closer, and Clara rested her head on his shoulder, watching the sun sink lower toward the horizon. We've built a good life, haven't we? A real partnership. Better than good. Better than I ever imagined possible. They sat in comfortable silence as twilight deepened, and Clara reflected on the unlikely journey that had led her here. From desperate orphan to mail-order bride to respected rancher's wife and mother, it seemed impossible when laid out like that. The transformation too complete to be believed. But it had happened one moment at a time, exactly as Nathan had said. Moments of honesty when lies would have been easier. Moments of courage when fear beckoned. Moments of choosing partnership over pride, truth over convenience, long-term trust over short-term comfort. Those moments had accumulated into years, and those years into a lifetime. A lifetime Clara could look back on without shame, knowing she'd corrected her mistakes and built something honest and lasting. I love you, Clara said quietly. She'd said it before, many times over the years, but it felt important to say it again now. Not because you saved me or because you gave me security, but because of who you are. Because of the man who values honesty above comfort and partnership above everything. I love you, Nathan Cole. Nathan pressed a kiss to her temple. I love you too. Have for years, though I'm not sure when exactly it happened. Somewhere between your confession and now, partnership became love, the kind that lasts. Inside, they could hear Mrs. Henley calling the children to dinner. Sarah's voice rose in response. James laughed at something. Margaret complained about having to stop reading. The ordinary sounds of family life, of home, of belonging. Clara stood and extended her hand to Nathan. Come on, we should go in before Mrs. Henley scolds us for letting dinner get cold. Nathan took her hand and rose, but instead of heading inside, he pulled Clara into an embrace. Thank you, he said into her hair. For what? For answering my advertisement, for having the courage to confess, for staying and doing the work, for becoming the partner I needed and the wife I wanted, for our children and our life and everything we've built together. He pulled back to look at her, for proving that second chances, when earned, are worth giving. Clara touched the necklace at her throat. Nathan's mother's necklace, worn smooth over the years, a daily reminder of trust and belonging and legacy. Thank you for giving me mine. They walked into the house together, hand in hand, partners in everything. Sarah was setting the table, James was washing up at the sink, Margaret reluctantly put away her book. Mrs. Henley bustled about serving food, her gray hair escaping its bun, her face creased with contentment. The kitchen was warm and bright and full of the people Clara loved most in the world. As she took her seat at the table, her place, earned through honesty and hard work, an unwavering commitment to being better, Clara felt a profound sense of completion. This was what she'd been searching for without knowing it. Not just security or stability, but the deep satisfaction of knowing she belonged somewhere, to someone, in a way that no lie could ever create. She'd lied about her age to get here. But the truth, the real, enduring truth, was that Clara had found exactly what she needed. A partnership built on honesty, a family built on love, a life built moment by precious moment into something that would outlast them both. Nathan caught her eye across the table and smiled, the kind of smile that held years of shared experience and absolute trust. Clara smiled back, reaching for his hand beneath the table, feeling the familiar warmth of his fingers intertwined with hers. Love didn't count years, she'd learned. It counted moments like this, ordinary dinners and sunset conversations, shared struggles and quiet joys, the daily choice to honor the partnership they'd built from imperfect beginnings. And measured in moments, Clara and Nathan Cole had built a lifetime rich beyond measure. A lifetime that started with a lie, but became the truest thing Clara had ever known. Outside, the Wyoming sky deepened to purple, and stars began to emerge, countless and brilliant against the vast darkness. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, wild and beautiful, and home. And inside the ranch house that Clara had helped build into something permanent and real, a family gathered around a table, bound together by the simple, profound truth that love, real love, was measured not in years but in the countless small moments of choosing each other, again and again, for as long as they both should live.